In my last video, I talked about how to evaluate whether or not the Pope is a liberal. There's one concept that I kind of touched on, but that I want to spend a lot more time with because it's very important in this day and age. Whenever we have large societies, there tends to be a leadership class and the masses under them. And it's fairly common for the purposes, the goals of each of those two classes to diverge and even maybe be the exact opposite of each other. And of course, leaders want to get their way and enact their goals. And so they'll tend to use some form of maybe deception. I don't know if that's too hard of a word, but at any rate, they want to get their way while still having the consent of the masses. And so we need a way to tell when that is actually happening. So the principle is the purpose of a system is what it does. In other words, sometimes the leaders aren't going to tell us what their actual goals are. So how do we find them out? Well, we find them out by watching what the leaders do and the outcomes of their action. So of course, sometimes people try things and it doesn't work out. They pivot and try something else. But over time, if there's a consistent direction, we can then look at the outcomes and say, okay, that's probably what the leaders want to happen. So let me give you a couple examples. Well, first of all, you might have heard about studies where researchers compared the priorities of voters in Western democracies with the policies that the politicians actually do. And as you might be able to guess, there's almost no correlation between those two. Essentially, leaders say whatever they have to say to get power. Then once they get power, they do whatever they want. So let me give you an example from maybe the political world and then from the church to illustrate this concept. So let's say that the president says to the public that he's concerned about the cost of healthcare and wants to lower it. So he puts through a bill to lower the cost of healthcare. It gets passed, it gets implemented, and lo and behold, the cost of healthcare doubles. Now, we might give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, this is really difficult to fix. It's a big problem. Maybe he tried something, it didn't work. He'll pivot and do something else, maybe to get it back to what it was before, or ideally lower, right? But let's say the president doesn't pivot. He just leaves it how it is with the doubled cost. Over time, we can say, okay, what he said doesn't appear to actually be what his real intention was. His real intention appears to have been to funnel more money out of the economy into the pockets of pharmacy companies, insurance companies, lobbyists, his fellow politicians, maybe himself. Okay, so let's look at the church, which is the ultimate concern of this channel. So let me read you some statements by Pope John the 23rd in his opening address to Vatican II, and I'm quoting here. The goals are that the church will make men, families, and peoples really turn their minds to heavenly things. Second, that the sacred deposit of Christian doctrine should be guarded and taught more efficaciously. Third, that the church should never depart from the sacred patrimony of truth received from the fathers, but at the same time, she must ever look to the present. To transmit the doctrine, pure and integral without any attenuation or distortion. And finally, that the Catholic Church therefore considers it her duty to work actively so that there may be fulfilled the great mystery of that unity, end quote, that Christ prayed for. Okay, so these sound like good goals. And furthermore, the 1960s were kind of a crazy time. So the world was radically different in the 1960s from the time of the First Vatican Council. So having a council makes sense. Purpose statements sound good. Okay, let's go. But of course, we find that after the council, when it was implemented, the results were exactly the opposite of the stated reasons for the council. So people did not set their minds on heavenly things. They became more humanistic, materialistic. The deposit of faith was not guarded. People have departed from the patrimony of truth. People have left the church in droves. People aren't pursuing vocations anymore as priests. There's some countries where the average age is like, for a priest, is like in the 70s, right? So in other words, the outcome of the Second Vatican Council was exactly the opposite of its stated intention. So as with healthcare, we initially give the benefit of the doubt and say, again, this is really complex, this is really difficult, we actually don't know what to do. The Second Vatican Council wasn't dogmatic, which means that they're actually allowed to change their positions. They can say this was a practical application. We were trying some things out, it didn't work, let's do something else. Okay, fair enough, that makes sense. However, it's been 60 years, and not only has there not been a pivot, when bishops have tried to pivot, they've been censured and removed from their positions. And so we then apply this principle, the purpose of a system is what it does, to say that, okay, the system that the Catholic hierarchy has put in place appears to be exactly the opposite of Pope John the 23rd's stated purpose. And we leave it at that. And again, a couple of points. This is not our only tool. Obviously, we can look at the documents themselves and say, okay, this was never wise in the first place. But as far as getting to the internal desires of our leadership, this is a good tool to use to see, to discern what their actual goals are. Because if they're continuing in a direction, we must conclude that they're happy with that direction. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. God bless.